Are we inching closer to the end of the dollar's reign as a global reserve currency? In the near future, can we expect to see another country and currency stronger than the American? All signs point towards it. Don't think so? Watch this video to see for yourself. By most standards, China's economy has been incredibly successful. Its $17.7 trillion GDP is second only to that of the United States. It's also the third largest trade country in the world after the United States and the European Union. But here's the thing. The yuan only makes up 3% of world trade, as compared with the US dollar's 87% market share. Despite having considerable economic and political clout, the nation doesn't control the flow of reserve money globally. But now, they want to change that. Being designated as a reserve currency isn't a formal process. It's more like winning a popularity contest, actually. The currency that's used the most for international trade and cross-border transactions becomes the de facto reserve currency. A currency's popularity merely depends on how secure and resilient the issuing country is seen to be. The dominant asset receives the title of reserve currency, since this is the asset or currency that the majority of central banks throughout the world choose to retain in reserve. There have been 6 significant reserve currency periods since 1450. Until Spain became more powerful in 1530, Portugal dominated the world reserves. For the most of the 17th and 18th centuries, currencies issued by the Netherlands and France dominated international trade. But as the British Empire grew, the pound sterling became the world's reserve currency until the First World War was over. The pound was replaced by the dollar, just as America overtook Britain in terms of economic strength. Since 2008, American dollars have been used to conduct more than 75% of all international transactions. Additionally, more than 60% of new foreign debt issues and 59% of global central bank reserves are denominated in dollars. No other currency comes close to these levels, even though the dollar's dominance of all of these markets and products has been gradually waning in recent years. Although the Chinese RMB isn't the best alternative, macroeconomic and geopolitical circumstances favor its rise to dominance. Chinese authorities made it plain this year that they wish to raise the renminbi standing as a reserve currency. The size of China's economy and trade flows can accommodate such a change. The nation must now persuade foreign central banks to begin keeping Chinese yuan in reserve. The People's Bank of China announced a partnership with the Bank for International Settlements, 5 countries, and this goal in July. China would each contribute 15 billion yuan, or Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Chile, to the renminbi liquidity arrangement. In Russia, the Chinese yuan has already established itself as the de facto reserve currency. Following sanctions imposed by the West as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine earlier this year, the Russian leadership turned to China. Currently, 17% of Russia's foreign exchange holdings are in yuan. The third most sought-after currency on the Moscow exchange is the yuan, so its position as a reserve currency could solidify if these alliances grow stronger. Another thing needs to happen to make China's currency the new world reserve. Beijing would need to significantly relax its control over the economy. It's inevitable that the use of Chinese currency will increase and take on more significance globally. Due to the dominance of the dollar, some nations believe their economies could be subject to U.S. policies. As a result, they seek to diversify the risk. Many African nations and several in the Middle East regularly utilize the yuan for trade, and that more than 70 central banks already hold part of it as a reserve currency. Over the past 20 years, foreign central banks have diversified their holdings, lowering the proportion of global reserves held in dollars. The yuan is being pushed hard by China to become the next major world currency, but it can't replace the dollar without a number of crucial events occurring beforehand, including at least $700 billion worth of yuan are kept in foreign exchange reserves by central banks worldwide. The People's Bank of China loosens its control over the yuan's peg to the dollar and permits unrestricted trade of the currency. Not to forget, a big factor would be Chinese financial markets becoming more transparent and people viewing China's monetary policies as stable. Then they'd have to aim for the US dollar's reputation for stability, which is backed by the US treasuries. Think they can do all that? It won't be simple or quick to replace the dollar, but there's also the fact that yuan reserves are progressively rising in nations with closer trading ties to China. So yes, it's entirely possible that the yuan may replace the US dollar as a result of its expanding dominance. In other words, China might gradually reduce the influence of the dollar. This insight comes from economists who believe that the current standing of Chinese currency is comparable to that of the American dollar in the 1950s. For all we know, it might only take a few decades for the yuan to achieve parity. And that would bring in some major changes in the world. Higher borrowing rates would be imposed on American consumers and businesses. Import costs would probably increase as well. Also, it'd result in higher interest rates for our economy's historically high debt. The US dollar is the world's reserve currency for more reasons than just the volume of trade. The robustness of the American economy instills confidence. The openness of the American financial system and the consistency of its monetary policies are crucial. It's worth noting that China has unallocated central bank reserves worth $4 to $5 trillion, some of which may be in yuan. The desire of central banks to possess this currency will increase as more bilateral swap lines are established and China continues to liberalize its capital market. Is this something we should be worrying about? Depends on who you ask. Because according to some experts, there's no one strong enough to battle global reserve currency status out of the USA's hands. Looking at the situation solely from an economic angle seems to be the source of the concern about losing the dollar. The recent recession, the declining purchasing power of more Americans compared to the rising purchasing power of more Chinese, the migration of manufacturing to China. All these discussions about the inflow and outflow of cash make the currency currently appear to be moving away from the U.S. The biggest disadvantage of the yuan will be its lack of transparency. Again, the main reason why countries favor the dollar is stability. On the other hand, China has tight control over the yuan, despite calls from the U.S. and other Western nations for the yuan to be more liberalized. As the second largest economy in the world turns from being dependent on exports to domestic consumption, China was insistent on market interventions, boosting the yuan to prevent a disturbance. In other words, the yuan is still a baby and needs the government's protection because it's so vulnerable. In contrast, the dollar is an adult who can easily navigate the unforgiving streets of free markets. By 2030, the population of the Chinese middle class will be 4 times larger than that of the American middle class, according to predictions made in 2011 by the UN Population Division and Goldman Sachs. Nope, it's not because Americans are becoming poorer, but simply because the Chinese are getting richer, and as their middle class grows, their leaders need to reassure them. The development of China's middle class is political benefits for the U.S. because as they gain more power, they will challenge China's central government. Similar to the significant migration of capital that occurred from Hong Kong to Canada before the colonies transferred to the mainland in 1997, the uncertainty of this position will certainly pressure many wealthy middle-class Chinese to invest in a more transparent environment like the U.S. The growing middle class in China will have a financial impact on the U.S. economy. More Chinese are anticipated to spend more money in the largest economy in the world, and more U.S. businesses are likely to expand their sales in China. These economic, demographic, and political forces all strengthen the U.S. economy, not weaken it. Sure, China excels in manufacturing, but a significant portion of global commerce also comprises financial, scientific, intellectual property, and information technology trade, among other things. They need to do more than just produce inexpensive goods if the yuan is to topple the dollar in international trade. Now, it's true that China is on the road to glory, but it's a long, winding road, and the U.S. won't back down without a fight. Do you think the yuan could be the new world reserve in the near future? Let us know in the comments below. If you like this video, don't forget to watch this one next, and we'll see you next time.